Hello Rarely Friends! Today I have a little bit of a special video for you. I've been getting a lot of questions recently about people wanting to know my thoughts on the different points of view, that being first, third, and second person narrations, and I thought, you know what, might as well just sit down and actually talk about them, because one question keeps popping up, and I have issues with the question itself, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But the question is, Max, which POV or point of view is the best? Now, before I go anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you, as always, that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a person with a face kinda like this. So let's start right now. Why do I have issues with that question? Why does the idea of looking at different literary devices and asking which is the best bothers me? Well, it is because, as I mentioned in the past, writers, in the act of telling a story, we have a writer's toolbox, which is, a collection of all the different devices that we use to create stories. And I don't think that one tool is better than other. I think that every single tool has different uses and is better for very particular tasks. Thus, I think that the question kind of shifts. It shifts from being about which is the best out of all of them to which is the best for which particular type of job. Now, that question I can totally get down with, so allow me to go over what I think each particular point of view is best at in my personal experience and opinion, and kind of compare and contrast them. How about that? So, let's begin. Let's begin with the oldest one out of all of them, that being third-person narration, which is a story told from a point of view of someone who is not the characters that we're looking at. It may be omniscient, by which I mean somebody who can see into everyone's mind and knows everything, or a limited point of view. Now, this ultimately boils down to the narrator saying, they did this, they thought about this, they said this. This actually is the oldest out of all of them, and it used to be like the status quo. It used to be the standard. The stories had to be told on this point of view. And then, of course, first-person narration came out later, and things changed quite a bit. Now, in my personal opinion, what have I used third person for, and what do I think it works the most effective with? Because, after all, it's merely just another tool, another way to tell a story, and thus, it's better for some things than other things. Now, in my personal opinion and history, I think that third-person narration is the best point of view for stories that deal with a larger scale. I think I've talked about this in the past, but it's the idea of being outside of a particular person's head allows you to see the entire scope. It gives you distance and allows you to look at things from a grander point of view. Personally, I do feel that stories from a third-person point of view are more effective at jumping from head to head because you always have that set of distance. I do feel that when you're stuck in one person's head and you jump to another person's head, the jump tends to be a little bit jarring, at least in my personal writing experience. So generally, I like to come into a story, and if the scale of this story is going to be enormous and is going to deal with multiple points of view and different sides of a struggle, I do like to actually come in and do third-person narration. I'm not saying that if you have that exact same setup and you use first person that it's wrong or bad. Just in my experience, it works way better to have a little bit of distance. It works better to have almost this neutral party, someone who's actually in between both of these struggles and can look at things objectively. Again, maybe it's just me, but I totally love the idea of the third person narrator kind of not picking a side and being actually entirely neutral, and that gives you, again, distance and space and allows you as the reader to distance yourself from what is going on and be able to look at things objectively. Because, when you have a grand scale, like a war or a revolution, it helps a lot to not be stuck to one point of view, to someone's ideals and personality, to be able to look at this encounter and say, are they really doing the right thing? Are they really doing the right thing? Are they thinking of the consequences? Then again, that's just me. I just have a pull for the dramatic and the intense. With all those things said, let me actually talk a little bit about first person now. Now, as I mentioned in the previous segment, I think that third person narration is way better for a story that has a grand scale, or when you're going to be jumping between points of view. Now, kind of the polar opposite is first person, because I think first person is the best sort of point of view for a story focused on one person. Like personal struggles, personal history, personal growth, first person all the way. I want to be in that person's head. I want to see the world through their eyes, through their point of view, and be able to understand them. If the encounter is about this enormous grand scale, a galactic war, a cosmic event, a cataclysmic, destroyment of the world. That's a word, I just made it up, don't worry about it. And I think that's better in third person because you have this scale, this idea, this distance from what is going on. For personal moments though, like a person overcoming depression, or a person, coming to terms with their anger and claiming revenge against the person who, hurt them in the past, I think those personal moments you want to be right in the person's head. You want to be showing them, basically almost locking the reader into their point of view so that they can see this story and understand this character. I actually talked about this on the blog recently, and it's the idea that to write a redeemable character, it's not about making them good people, it's about showing how they justify their choices. And I think that, I don't care what sort of character it is. I don't care how selfish they may be, how cruel they may be. If you tell me that story in first-person narration, and you show me how they justify their choices, I will totally understand them. I may not agree with them, but I will totally understand them. Why? Because you're putting me in those shoes. You're forcing me to walk a mile in those shoes. And that's a powerful tool right there. Now, again, this sounds like way more praise than third-person narration, but do I think one is better than the other? Not really. I don't think that one particular point of view is better than the other. I think that they can all serve different tasks. And they bring different things to the table. For instance, I do think that third-person narration is way better for larger stories, but if you want to have a plot twist that, your audience won't be able to see coming, first-person narration is a little bit more effective in my opinion because it's so easy to get blindsided. It's so easy to be blindsided when you're stuck in someone's head. Because again, and I think I've made this video game analogy before, but it's the idea that, when you're in a first-person video game, you can't see what's behind you. And when you're in a third-person video game or third-person narration, you can turn the camera and see who's about to stab you in the back. Again, different tools for different jobs, am I right? And it's the idea of, coming in and ultimately, and I'm going to talk about second person in a little bit, but and the one thing that I want you to take from this is this, okay? Although I've given you a set of tools and a set of advice and a set of ideas, ultimately here's the deal, okay? If you walk into a story and one tense and one point of view feels good and feels right, go with it. Don't look back. Don't consider anything I just told you. If it feels right for the story, go for it. And don't stop. Don't look back. Because his stories are weird. His stories are incredibly weird, and there are no rules to any of this. They're just simply recommendations and advice and things that I think. And ultimately, none of those things come before the story because the story is always right. Last thing, a couple of people were asking me, hey Max, what are your thoughts on second-person narration? And it's funny because a couple of messages, and some of them even went as far as phrasing that, sometimes it feels that second-person narration is pretty much pointless. And I mildly echo with that, and it's not exactly the fact that it's pointless, but it's the fact that it's a tool for a very particular type of job. And that is to put the reader right in a particular situation. By the way, second-person point of view stories are those that have statements such as, you see this, you do this, you say this. And of course, those stories are were made famous by things such as choose your own adventure sort of games, where it's like, you find yourself in this place, what do you do? And that's cool, and it's neat, and I think that there's actually room for experimentation there. I do honestly feel that it's not a dead art. It's absolutely not a dead art, because there's still, choose your own adventure books that are coming out all the time. And particularly now that we have the sort of internet and a digital way of distributing content, and kind of like the visual novel, and I wish that people did more with it. I actually honestly do. Now, as for my own personal experience, the last time that I used second-person narration, I think it was for a handful of exercises when I was in college, and I also wrote a Choose Your Own Adventure novel a long time ago when I first got started. It was fun, and while I haven't been using it as much, I do think that second-person narration has a really good, awesome power, and that is that it puts the reader, the actual reader, in the story. That's cool. That's awesome. That could go so many ways. It has a couple of downfalls, such as telling readers how they feel, which I don't necessarily think it's always as effective as it could be, though I could be entirely wrong. Maybe it hasn't been done right, It's one of those things where, I don't want to come in and claim absolutes, because ultimately, writing advice is just my opinion. It's just what I think. And I can be proven wrong. What if somebody what if you, yes, you, go and write, the next awesome Choose Your Own Adventure novel, or a second point of view story, and just knock it out of the park? Then at that point, I'm just wrong. And you've proven me wrong, and you've found a different way to use the same medium. And that's awesome. That's writing. That's the great thing about writing, that none of these things are set in stone. And you can find your own way to go about doing things. Once again, in summary, I think that all of these POVs or points of view are useful for different tasks, such as, different tools for different jobs. It's as simple as that. I think that third-person narration is way more effective for stories that have different, people in them and different sides of a struggle. Definitely. That's just the way I feel about it. As for first-person narration, I think that it's all about the self, the person, and the central character in the story. I think that if you're telling a story about a personal struggle, first person goes a long way because you're putting us right there in their head. And as for second person, it's really effective at putting the reader in the story, which is something that doesn't usually happen. And, you know, I think there's room to experiment. I don't think it's a dead art by any means necessary, but I think that, you know, people need to play a little bit more with it. But yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about POVs, or points of view. I hope that this video has helped, and I hope that if anything, I've given you my point of view and another point of view to go about looking at things. Another point of view. I just noticed that. I'm the freaking worst. With all those things said, though, I hope that you did enjoy the video, and if you have thoughts of your own or feedback, please feel free to go down into the comments below and let me know what you think. With all those things said, though, I want to thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, do all the socially related things, and if you would like even more writing content, feel free to go into my official writing blog over at maxkirin.tumblr.com. Thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you soon! Mwah.